Welcome, everyone. This program will be recorded. Please make sure that your audio and video are disabled. Interactions via chat will not appear on the recording. So welcome, everyone, to tonight's program. Tonight's program is Anti-Semitic Propaganda, Then and Now, presented by the San Antonio Public Library for Holocaust, Learn, and Remember. My name is Freddie. I am a librarian with the San Antonio Public Library, and I'm joined by my fellow librarian, Panaga. Hi, Panaga. We are so glad that everyone was able to join us tonight. Welcome. Tonight's presenter is Dr. Barnes. Before I introduce him, I want to do a little housekeeping. Make sure, everybody, that you disable your audio and video. Also, during the program tonight, if you have any questions or comments, please just put them in the chat box. Be aware that any questions and comments in the chat can either be public or can be sent private to the hosts, me and Panaga. Also, once tonight's program is complete, one of us, me or Panaga, will share any questions you have with Dr. Barnes with the Q&A session towards the end. So with that said, let me go ahead and introduce Dr. Barnes. We are so happy to have him tonight for the program. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Dr. Barnes was a professor of sociology at the University of Incarnate Word. He retired in May of 21. He chaired the Department of Sociology and has specialized as both a scholar and social activist on the death penalty. His writings have appeared in numerous journals, books, and newspapers. Dr. Barnes was the first recipient of the UIW Presidential Teaching Award in 2005. He was also the recipient of the Robert Connolly Award for Faculty Leadership in the 2017-18 school year, and also a past president of the UIW Faculty Senate. Additionally, Dr. Barnes is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of the University of Kansas, where he also received 2 master's degrees and his doctoral degree. Dr. Barnes was made Professor Emeritus of Sociology upon his retirement. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Barnes.
Well, hello, everyone. I know that you all are busy people and have other things you could be doing. So I appreciate you taking time out tonight to be part of this program. Just a word about myself before I get started. I taught a number of classes as a sociologist, and I had 2 classes that were particularly favorites of mine. I created both of them. One was called A Social History of the Civil Rights Movement, and the other class was A Social History of the Holocaust. And I particularly enjoyed teaching that. The material of the Holocaust is not always easy. In fact, it's never easy. And I would have students that would come into class, and there wasn't a required class, so they were there voluntarily. And I enjoyed the dickens out of teaching that class. But I would start every semester by asking students, tell me what you know about the Holocaust. And usually the answers were the same. Hitler, Auschwitz, and Frank. Okay, tell me what else you know. And it was like, don't know. And so I thought, well, this is fun. This is when teaching really becomes really rich, because it gives me an opportunity to take people who don't know anything about the topic and help them learn. And so I guess in a way, tonight I kind of see the same mission here. So we're going to take a look at one particular facet of Nazi Germany, and that's the propaganda. But I thought that given the rise in anti-Semitic activity in the past 20-some years here in the United States, according to the Anti-Defamation League, we had more anti-Semitic incidents last year than in any year since they have been keeping track. And that goes back a long way. But I thought that also, let's just not concentrate on the past, but let's talk about what's going on in our society today. And so I've titled this Nazi Propaganda, Then and Now. And so if you all are ready, I'll do this and get going here. And think we can pull up all of this. Now, first of all, is my sound okay? And can everybody see this adequately?
Yes, sound is okay. Everyone can see.
Okay. Then let me, I gotta get the slideshow here. Okay, there we go. So, then and now, anti-Semitic propaganda. This is a kind of a, looks like a group of academics got together with this definition. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. I serve as a docent, folks, at the Jewish campus, which houses, among other things, the Holocaust Memorial Museum of San Antonio. And I make presentations there. And if you've never had a chance to come to that museum, you certainly are welcome to do so. Propaganda tries to force a doctrine on the whole people. This is Hitler in Mein Kampf. Propaganda works on the general public from the standpoint of an idea and makes them ripe for the victory of this idea. There's a pattern to how propaganda is presented. And this pattern is the same today as it was 70 years ago. It's the same in the United States as it was in Europe 7 decades ago. It repeats the same thing, the same information over and over and over. It doesn't deviate from its message, which gives the illusion that most people agree with what they're hearing, that it becomes factual, not fiction. But essentially what propaganda is doing is taking the truth and twisting it and exploiting it. But it does so in a language that speaks to people in a way that they can understand, they can comprehend. It's direct. It's not a sort of fancy academic language. It appeals to people's emotions. And this is very, very important, okay? Because much of the time, we rely upon our rational means to make our way through society, to work through the daily schedule, to meet our demands. We rely upon rationality to help guide us. And this is not the case with propaganda. It relies on emotions. And what propaganda does is it uses accessible media, which used to be limited to radio and TV, movies, but today, of course, has certainly broadened out into a wide range of social media. In terms of the Nazis, Joseph Goebbels has a primary place when the topic is propaganda. He was the Reich Minister for Public Propaganda, Public Enlightenment and Propaganda. He got this in 1933. Now, Hitler came to power in January of 1933. as chancellor, and then he appointed Goebbels, whom he had known for a long time. Goebbels was a particularly skilled and gifted propagandist. He had certain physical limitations. He kind of walked with a little limp, and he certainly made up for whatever physical limitations he had by powerful speech. And he was a smart writer and a good speaker. I'm going to take a look with you at 5 different means by which Nazi propaganda was disseminated, okay? And we're going to start with the first one here, which is a collection of posters that illustrate, I think, certain tropes about anti-Semitism. We begin with some obvious characterizations. The hooked nose, the stubbly face, the suspicious look in the eyes. These are all designed to portray the image of the Jew as crafty, shifty, untrustworthy, malicious, somebody with bad intentions who won't be truthful. And you can kind of see some of this in this particular poster, which takes 3 aspects of everyday life and turns them into really nasty statements about Jews. Here, the Jewish butcher is grinding up a rat to go into the sausage. And here, vodka is being poured into the milk. And then the Jewish cook, the Jewish baker, is kneading the bread with his feet, bare feet, in a very unsanitized way. You see, all of these images are designed to portray certain aspects of Jewish life as seen by the Nazis, and to portray it in a very negative light, and designed too to kind of scare people, Aryans, and to make them think, oh, I can't trust the Jews at all. They are our misfortune. And as the war progressed, this imagery became very powerful, with the Jew lurking behind the British flag, the American flag, the Soviet flag, and to portray the idea that the cause of the war is Jewish manipulation, Jewish bankers, a Jewish conspiracy. And this one makes it very clear, with the finger of guilt pointed at a Jewish person. He is guilty for the war. Leaves nothing to the imagination there. There's 2 common themes to Nazi propaganda that are prominent here. One, on the left, we have the Jewish merchant. Again, look, suspicious eyes, a hooked nose. Again, this imagery just stays incredibly stable over time. These kinds of characterizations. And here, the merchant is counting money while he is surrounded by death, by fire, by destruction. And of course, then the unmistakable message of this poster, which is that Jews are rats. Now, this becomes very, very important, okay? Because with the message that Jews are rats, Jews are venomous, Jews are dangerous, what do we do when we discover rats or mice in the attic? Well, generally we set traps and try to kill them. Okay, why? Because we consider them a pest. We consider them, that they're going to be destructive. They're going to troop the insulation in our vents, that kind of thing. And so we have to rid ourselves of these pests. They're not cute, furry little animals. They have bad intentions, and we have to protect ourselves against those bad intentions. The way we do it is by getting rid of them. And so, if you can take a group of human beings, okay, and equate them in the common consciousness, the non-Jewish conscience, with rats, then the same kind of logic holds. Oh, we must get rid of them. We must isolate them. We must ghettoize them. And of course, then we finally, I guess we have to exterminate them. And so the Jew as a rat is a powerful sort of message. This poster says in German, the NSDAP, and those are initials that stand for the National Socialist German Workers' Party, i.e. the Nazi Party, protects the people. Your fellow comrades need your advice and help, so join the local party organization. Okay, well, here we see the ideal Aryan family, okay? Mother and father, handsome, good looking. The children seem to be strong, healthy, vibrant. They look adoringly on, especially the mother, looking adoringly on the new baby, and the little girl that has a kind of quasi-angelic look about her. Right now, I think of those things and take a look at this. This is from today. Yeah, it's okay to be white. This is from the Aryan Freedom Network, one of a host of anti-Semitic groups scattered across the country. And this kind of message shows up on posters, flyers. It can be posted almost anywhere. We've had incidents at the Jewish campus of these things being distributed. They've ended up on the lawns of Jewish families in San Antonio. And I'm not just talking about a long time, I'm talking about very, very, very recent history. But again, the imagery, here we have the blonde, attractive mommy with the baby. And the not so subtle message is that this white baby needs to be protected. Okay. And it needs to be protected from people who are not white. And that includes, among others, Jews. Well, of course, this is mixing race and religion, and it's so a second way to deal with anti-Semitic propaganda is to use film. And Goebbels and the Reich Ministry was very good at doing this. This is a poster for a movie that came out in 1940 called Jew Sus. That would be the Jew Sus. And that was the nickname of the Jew in this particular movie, who, as this poster would indicate, it has crafty, shiftless, sinister eyes with evil lurking behind them. It was a very expensive movie to make, but it made lots of money too. And so it was a movie that portrayed all of these images of Jews that were so, wholly negative. And one of the interesting things is that the director of this film, he was charged after the war with crimes against humanity, and he was put on trial, but he was not found guilty. He was acquitted. And his defense had been that basically Reich Minister Goebbels was the one who directed this effort. He was the one who had final ownership and authorship of the content of the movie. It was out of my hands. That was the director's defense, and he was acquitted. He was the only one who was involved in actually creating propaganda that led to a trial at the end of the war. This is a poster for one of the most popular movies, also made in 1940. It's called The Eternal Jew. And it was not only a movie, it was a traveling exhibition, as you'll see in just a minute. Okay. And again, the same tropes, the same stereotypes, the same stigmata of the Jews in this movie, as in almost all the propaganda. But perhaps the greatest piece of propaganda, which some people don't think is propaganda, they think of it as a documentary movie or just film, is Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will. Now, I will tell you, Riefenstahl was a very innovative filmmaker. She was very creative, and there are certain camera techniques that are used in this piece of propaganda that were very creative, very inventive. She begins this by showing a plane hovering in the clouds, a small plane, and it's hovering in the clouds, and the music is ominous. And as the plane nears the ground, it finally lands, and out steps Hitler himself. And the idea behind this is very obvious. This is to equate, a godlike Hitler coming down from the heavens to save us. And it goes from there. It films the 1934 Nazi Party Congress, which takes place in Nuremberg, in huge outdoor theater, stadium, better word for it. This is a shot from the movie. And here we see the throngs of people gathered, soldiers for the most part. And this is the big viewing stand, which is still standing. I've been to it a couple of times. And you've got to be careful what you do. The temptation is, especially for young college students, is to stand up, get up here on the speaker's rostrum and give a Nazi salute, or say Heil Hitler or something to that effect. But those kinds of gestures and symbols are illegal in Germany, and people will get arrested for doing that today at what remains of Zeppelin Field. Here we see three individuals, and I just want to point them out to you. On the far left in black is Heinrich Himmler. Himmler was a failed chicken farmer who was made head of the SS, the Schutzstaffel, the secret police. And then in the middle, of course, in the middle and out in front of the other two is Adolf Hitler himself. And then this man is Victor Lutzi. And Lutzi had just been appointed the head of the stormtroopers, the SA. And he'd only been in that position for a matter of just a few weeks. This film was made in the summer of 1934, in August, principally. And it was filmed following the Night of the Long Knives, when Hitler directed the killings of Ernst Röhm and other heads of the SA. Hitler's feelings were that the SA had gotten too powerful and was in threats of maybe even toppling him, but certainly posed a threat to Himmler and the SS. So he had his old friend Ernst Röhm shot. And anyways, so Lutzi had taken over as the head of SA, and this is him in this position. Okay. A third way of disseminating propaganda, and very effective, because you do this with kids, and you start this very early on, this indoctrination. Okay? And if the indoctrination begins very early on, then children just grow up assuming that this is the natural order of things. It reminds me greatly of a line in South Pacific in the musical. And I think the line goes, "You have to learn to hate before it's too late." The Nazis understood that really well. And this is the front cover of the most popular children's book. It's called The Poisonous Mushroom. And is full of characterizations like this. Again, the stubbly face, you can't even see the eyes that are lurking here and the evil behind them. The bent nose, and he's luring children with pieces of candy and luring them to God knows what, but it's not good. And here we see German children. If you had been an Aryan child in Nazi Germany in the 1930s, you knew this book well. All school children read it. They became very well acquainted with its pictures. And then, of course, you see the seeds of this anti-Semitism begins early on. It sinks in. Look at the intent faces on these kids. They're looking at it pretty seriously, you know. They're getting the message, and they're going to grow up carrying that message with them. Here's a drawing from The Poisonous Mushroom. The Jewish nose is hooked at its tip. It looks like the number 6. That's what the caption reads. And throughout is a common theme, and that is that money is the god of the Jews. And here, the Jewish banker, merchant, businessman is sitting on a pot of gold, because that's what matters most. This is the propaganda. Books and newspapers become a major means of disseminating Nazi propaganda. This is the cover of a book that I'm sure you've heard of, Adolf Hitler's famous work, Mein Kampf, or My Struggle. It's what he wrote when he was in prison for almost a year following the failure of the Munich beer hall putsch. He got a very light prison sentence for that act of insurrection, and was released after just about 12 months. And he wrote this, My Struggle, while he was in prison. And when he became chancellor and later Führer, he had copies of this book given as a gift to every newlywed German couple, Aryans, in Germany. And here's a copy of what the book looked like. And it has, did Mein Kampf have an effect? Well, I'd like for you to consider this. Here is Donald Trump. Reading Mein Kampf in college had a profound effect on me. Very, very interesting. Of course, there were many problems in Germany at that time. They were losers, they lost. But Adolf Hitler, that is to say, I don't agree with everything he was saying at the time, of course, but I do respect him as a leader, tremendous respect. And I suppose you could say I try to incorporate some of his teachings into everything I do I do today in business, my daily life, and my politics. And as you can see, this was from an interview with Time magazine in 2002. So did Mein Kampf have an effect? Yeah, a far-reaching one, huh? It wasn't the only work, okay? One of the most popular books was Houston Stewart Chamberlain, who was British, wasn't even German, called The Foundations of the 19th Century. And what Chamberlain does in this is to come up with this really sloppy but calculated racial hierarchy, with of course Aryans at the top and blacks and Jews at the bottom, Untermenschen, subhumans, and this is just a book that promulgates this notion of Aryan racial superiority, which of course becomes central to Nazi politics, government, and of course to the war. A quote from Chamberlain: "Not only the Jew, but also all that is derived from the Jewish mind corrodes and disintegrates what is best in us." Well, I guess that's pretty correct, isn't it? But this gives you an idea of the kind of books that people are being exposed to. And I should point out here that at this time, in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, we're talking about Nazi Germany. But if you go back and Nazi propaganda there, but if you go back to the turn of the century, around 1900, arguably Germany was not the most anti-Semitic country in Europe. I suppose one could reasonably argue that that dishonor falls to France. And I often was asked a question in my class, well, how did Hitler become such an anti-Semite? And that question needs to be answered by pointing out, as I would, that he was not an aberration at all. He was in keeping with what was a widespread societal trend across the European continent, that of anti-Semitism. And that had been the case before Jews were locked away in the first ghettos in Italy back in the 14th century. And Hitler was just following a common trait. He was mimicking and getting in line with the common themes in his society at that time. He was just being very anti-Semitic. And you got to understand that if this anti-Semitism is structured into one's institutions, organizations, our way of life, then the whole society falls under this trap. And if I might just deviate for a quick second, I had a conversation years ago with a good friend of mine, a Methodist minister, and we got onto the subject of the death penalty. And so I gave him my 20-minute lecture on why the death penalty is bad. And I ended by telling him a story about how when Mother Teresa went to San Quentin's death row, she said to the guard who had been her escort, "Just remember, what you do to these men, you do to God." And she walked off of death row. This minister friend of mine came up a couple of Sundays later and said to me, our conversation really changed my life. I said, "How's that?" And he goes, "Well, I've had to reconsider all that I thought I knew about the death penalty. And you've convinced me that it's not a very good social policy, and I'm changing my position." And I said, let me ask you, how, as a Methodist minister, did you find for all these years that you thought the death penalty was good? And he says something that is related, I think, to our topic tonight. He said, I grew up in Texas. I was never exposed to the death penalty in school. I never had any teachers who taught about it. I never heard any ministers preach from the pulpit on it. I didn't know any newspapers who had editorialized against it. And I just knew politicians overwhelmingly supported it. So I just felt it must be the right thing to do. He said, now I don't believe that anymore. And the very, very similar pattern, you see, is what drives anti-Semitism. If you're surrounded by it, exposed to it, inculcated in it, okay, it becomes a way of life, a culture, a habit. Well, one of the newspapers that was very, very popular was Der Stürmer, the Stormer. It was published by Julius Streicher. Here you see his name. Okay. This slogan, and I won't pronounce it in German, because my German's too bad. But that means the Jew is our misfortune. And that was on the front issue of every Der Stürmer. Again, the drawings, same tropes again, same stereotypes, same imagery. Here, the innocent Aryan woman is surrounded by the conniving, cheating black man, Jew. Streicher joined the Nazi Party in 1922. The Streicher, or the Stürmer, was published between 1923 and 1945. It came out every week, and it came out every week right up to the last week of the war. Streicher was tried at Nuremberg for crimes against humanity, and he was hanged in October of 1946. And here we see a group of German men, some in uniform, some not. This sign reads, "With the Stürmer against the Jew." And this, again, the motto of the Stürmer: "The Jews are our misfortune." And then we come to a fifth thing, which is exhibitions. And here is a shot from the exhibition of the Eternal Jew, which attracted throngs of people, came from all over Germany to see it on exhibit. But perhaps one of the most fascinating exhibits was Goebbels pulling together this degenerate art. It wasn't degenerate at all. Hitler hated modernism. He hated Cubism, he hated Impressionism, he hated abstract art. He considered all of that, if it wasn't cast in an old Roman style, he considered it degenerate art, and hence the title of this exhibit. And here's Goebbels leading a group of SS officers into an exhibit hall. And here is another group of citizens, primarily. Looks like some Nazi Party members here, armbands. And they are looking at an exhibit. And you see these paintings. This is what Hitler considered, and Goebbels, and considered to be degenerative art. Okay, so let's talk about today. All right. Posters. Here's one brought to us by the local Stormer Book Club, Daily Stormer. Every time some anti-white, anti-American, anti-freedom event takes place, you look at it and it's Jews behind it. I guess the message is pretty clear there. Here is a scene from, yes, you got it, January 6th, 2 years ago. Camp Auschwitz, a place where 1.1 million people died, being reduced to something akin to a summer camp. And then this one from the Proud Boys is the Proud Boys, the Aryan Freedom Network, the Oath Keepers. These groups are all preaching a doctrine of hate. And here we see it in a not so veiled way, with the initials standing for 6 million weren't enough, referring to the 6 million Jews who perished during the Holocaust. Yeah. And then, of course, the challenge that the Holocaust never existed, Holocaust denial. which is perhaps one of the gravest pieces of neo-Nazi propaganda today. Here's a book cover that challenges that idea directly. Did 6 million really die? The truth at last. Well, I can guarantee it. You open up that book, you're not going to get anything close to the truth at all. You get the idea. And this is, many of you will recognize this. This is the front gate of Auschwitz I, the old Polish officers' camp grounds. And this was taken over. This was the first Auschwitz. The Auschwitz that we often see with the railroad station and the sorting of people. That's actually about 2 kilometers away from here. It's Auschwitz II, so-called Birkenau. And there was an Auschwitz III as well, called Monowitz. But the book cover is, this in German, this means Arbeit macht frei, means work sets you free. Of course, it doesn't set you free. Here it was designed to kill you. Here's a message painted on a synagogue in Seattle just a few years ago, 2017. Holocaust is fake history. And notice they've kind of turned this into what appears to be dollar signs. Again, equating Jews with money grubbing, sinister, stealing, thieving people. And this from a public gathering. Holocaust is a lie. Jews killed 30 million. And I want you to notice, we can't see his face here, but the man who is holding this is dressed very nicely in a 3-piece suit. So, let us not fall into a trap of thinking that these things are being disseminated only by really unscrupulous persons, being disseminated by people who look like they're respectable business people. Although this one, which seems to be, I take it by the Yankees symbol, somewhere in New York, Google it. Jews control America. Yeah, okay. And then a whole series of posters here. More children are molested by rich Jews than are killed by AR-15s. Ban Jews, not guns. Well, of course, nothing can be further from the truth. I don't even know what to comment on this. And then we're going to see a collection of these, which are brought to us by the folk over at Goyim TV, and which is a private news channel that you pay for, that is full of anti-Semitic propaganda. And here we see a poster that says every single aspect of the Ukraine-Russia war is Jewish. And Star of David, the hammer and sickle. Yeah. But what is maybe the biggest lie on this sheet is all the way down here at the bottom in small print. These flyers were distributed randomly without malicious intent. One, they weren't distributed randomly. And 2, the intent most certainly decidedly was malicious. So whoever distributed this knew exactly what was going on. We've had these kinds of flyers which have been distributed over at the Jewish campus. In recent months, years, we've had them show up on the lawns of Jewish families here in San Antonio. This is not something that just happens in Los Angeles or New York. We've experienced this kind of stuff in our own communities, every single aspect of the COVID agenda is Jewish, again, from Goyim TV. And what this does is it lists a whole list of people who hold various positions of importance at the CDC or at the Health and Human Services, and some scientific organizations, and they're all Jewish. So you see, you want to know what's behind COVID? It's the Jews. Well, nothing new about this message. Every single aspect of the Biden administration is Jewish, according to this one. And this lists the former Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, Merrick Garland, so forth and so on. And then, of course, with these flyers were distributed, that one. Okay. And then this kind of really illustrates the twin sort of linkage of Jews with money financing, wealth, hoarding money, and controlling politics and business. And here we got a whole group of various important people in communications, mass media, and in finance who happen to be Jewish. And this designed to convey the impression that the Times, the Post, Los Angeles Times, the Tribune of Chicago, the Wall Street Journal, Fortune, CNN, AP, Reuters, Bloomberg, these are all controlled by Jews. But I don't know if you know who Ted Nugent is. He's claims to be a famous rock star, a rocker. He's a gun lover, and so he put together this poster himself. He did this himself. Who is really behind gun control? It's those various people in Congress, and who happen to be Jewish. And of course, again, the message is very clear that those who intend to take your guns are the Jews. Now I come to the last couple of slides here. I want you to look at this. This is from Charlottesville in Virginia in 2017. The one where there's some good people on both sides. Nighttime, torch lit parade. These are young white people, appear to be in this limited shot of what was a much larger group, appear to be solely males here. Okay. Now, I want you to take a look at this picture. This is from Austria, a nighttime gathering, torch-lit parade of Austrian Nazis in 1938, after the Anschluss, the annexation. And here you see the torches. It's not exclusively a male audience here, but I'm just struck by the parallels between, this 80-year gap between this in the United States in 2017 and this in Austria in 1938. And that's really a striking contrast, and I think should trouble and worry us. But it leaves us with one very distinct message, and this is the last slide, and that is the need for all of us to stand against anti-Semitism. And this starts, guys, with the very smallest, tiniest, seemingly non-consequential thing. When somebody a family member, a friend, somebody you work with says, hey, did you hear the one about the Jew who, stop them right there. Don't even let it begin, okay? Because as the Anti-Defamation League points out, in what they call their pyramid of hate, okay, this pyramid ends up with genocide at the very top. But again, begins with biased attitudes down at the very bottom. And the point of this pyramid of hate, according to the Anti-Defamation League, is that when you come to accommodate one level of prejudice, that only makes it possible for the next level of prejudice to emerge. And the logical and disgusting culmination of all of this, in the case of Nazi Germany, obviously, was the extermination of 6 million Jews and 5 million others, non-Jews. So that's my plea to you, is that, and when you hear somebody use a phrase like, oh, I'm going to go to that auction and Jew them down. What? Stop them. No, no, no. That kind of language is not acceptable. And so sometimes it requires that we stand up, get out of our comfort zone, and tell people, don't do that.